Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to Let's Talk Maywood on Diversity Today Media. I am your host, Dr. Reggie Ratliff, and I pray that your new year is off to a strong start. And joining me is my co-host, my co-laborer in the vineyard, an expert and certified and qualified investment advisor, Terrence Hollingsworth. Terry, how you doing this evening, brother?
Yo, what's going on, Maywood? How you doing, Dr. Ratliff? I'm doing well.
I tell you, man, I'm out here in the DMV, right? And unlike back home, school has been canceled every day this week. So got the news on Sunday because they expected 6 to 12 inches of snow, and then they canceled it for Tuesday because of icy road and conditions and cold weather. Now the cold weather, okay, check this out. So the cold weather is upper 30s, 38, 39 degrees. So they're closing. So today, just this afternoon, I was okay. Let me get myself ready. Let me shave because I hadn't shaved, and then I get a notice here, let you know that due to inclement weather conditions and the sun shining real bright and cold temperatures and strong wind gusts, classes be canceled tomorrow on Thursday.
Wow.
So I'm like, hey, I feel good, but then from someone who teaches IB classes to junior and senior, especially the seniors who are getting ready for the IB exams coming up, the business exams in late April, that just shrinks our time of preparation. So it's like I gotta get on the ball and get them ready. I'm happy that I have the extra days off, but it's just going to put more pressure on the students to prepare and perform well when the time comes. So kind of mixed
Hey,
about it.
here's my question. Do you even own a shovel?
Yeah. Look. I brought it from Chicago. Okay. so I did use it. And what they do is when they plow the road, they plow it and it goes onto the driveway if you live in certain parts of the street. And that means you have a pile of snow. And not only do you have to shovel out your driveway, then you got to shovel at that snowbank so you can get out the driveway.
Yeah.
so what I did was I put on my sweats, what I'm saying? My sweat stuff, and I just put a workout in, put the Chicago house music on and some gospel. And I just went to work for like an hour or so, and I got a good sweat going. So it worked out. But I got a shovel and salt. So they don't have salt here like they do back home. They use like special sand and some type of ointment or something, to handle the road. So it's all good, man.
Well,
So
I know this. This weather has been weird, right? Down south,
yeah.
Texas, they're all getting snow. Here in the Midwest, we're not getting hardly any snow outside of Kansas City, right?
Wow.
And so, uh,
Has it been
personally,
cold though? Has it been real cold?
nope, it's not. They're not very cold at all. All right.
Wow.
So we're staying above 30 degrees, and for it to be January in the Midwest, we're winning.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I remember when I came home last year in January for the Hometown Hero Awards banquet, um, in the first week of January, it was maybe like during the day it was like 40 degrees, dude. By that evening it dropped to like 30 below, and it was crazy. How that thing swung. It swung like almost 70 degrees, and the wind chill made it like 40 below. It felt like 40 below. So I'm like,
Yeah.
I ain't never come back to Chicago in the winter, like ever, ever. But what's going on, man, in the world of finance and in preparation of this inauguration coming up in a couple of weeks?
The world is changing. Unfortunately, last year, we had a lot of hurricanes in the South and things like this. This year, California has the worst fire that they've
Fire.
had in the history, right? What that means
Mm-hmm.
is insurance rates are probably going to go up all across the country, and that
Oh yeah.
sucks,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yeah.
If you know anything
Yeah.
about how insurance works, um, you take all of everybody and put them in the same pool, and then
Mm-hmm.
hopefully, it's less on each person, but the insurance is going up. But you
Yep.
know, saying the world is changing, here's the thing that probably is the thing that I'll leave with everybody today and just try to be brief. We heard a lot about AI, and we're hearing how AI is going to affect, every place that we work and things like this. And that should remind people of 2000 when we were hearing about the internet and how it was changing.
Y2K, Y2K.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And from the investment standpoint, well, this is what I've noticed. Some of the AI companies and investments, they're not holding. So, big rally, by the end of the day, they're selling off, and they're not making they may make new highs, but they're not keeping them. So,
Okay.
um, people could take that as two different ways, right? One being, um, oh, I should be afraid, or if we remember Y2K,
Hmm.
if you would have invested in those companies, even when the hype left and you stayed consistent, you made a lot of money over the next 10 years, right?
Right, right, right.
And so that's the opportunity that's in front of us right now.
Do you consider like the sell off as market correction by selling off, even though the market's been performing? Like, what are your thoughts about that, or is that just something that is part of the ebb and flow of the stock market?
It's part of the ebb and flow, and there's some uncertainty about what the Trump administration is going to do. So, for example, some of the marijuana companies under Biden, when he first got in office, he was saying, "Well, we want to legalize marijuana and all this," and then he
Hmm.
didn't do it, right?
Hmm.
And so Trump doesn't support marijuana or legalization of marijuana. At least it didn't seem so. So all of those companies have kind of sold off. But do you
Hmm.
view that as a 4-year problem with an opportunity to own these industries, or do you view it as something that that's investable? Each is their own. I think that the federal government eventually will legalize marijuana.
Okay.
Is in the next 4 years? Is in the next administration? We don't know. But we
Yeah.
watch the money shift from that sector into other sectors, and but
Hmm.
that's what the market is about. And as people, we need to make sure that we're investing in something.
Yeah, for sure. Say that again, because it's highly needed to hear that advice over and over again, and take advantage of the opportunities that exist in our world, man. So I just want to ask you this before we switch, gears and bring on our guests. Do you think there will be much change in terms of policy, economic policy specifically, under the Trump administration, in terms of financials and investments and things like that?
Honestly, I don't think so. I mean, while the market was running 25%, over the last 2 years, there are people out there that's going, oh, things are bad, inflation and this and that. And it depends on where you sit, right? And so if the thing to understand about the way the market moves is it's going to move from one sector to the next, but it's not going to stay still, and it's
Hmm.
not going to sit in cash, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Yeah,
as investors, you just have to make the adjustment of what's next, what do you see, and make sure you have some exposure there.
do you think the village of Maywood, in terms of the financials and with the flow of income coming in through the casino, will not be placed at risk, but do you think it's going to make much of a difference in terms of how financials are um, administered, if you will? Um,
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing because in an environment where potentially they're raising interest rates and things like this because they want to keep the economy at 2%, and we
mhm.
still haven't gotten there. Um, there's been talk about Maywood borrowing more money.
Yeah.
And if you borrow money at a higher interest rates, well, what are you doing? Your debt service is going to you're not going to be able to do other things. And
Sure.
so, as we talk about the need for this changing environment, this new income, and the demographics, there's a need for a strategic plan in Maywood, and I hope the the decision makers start to take these things in account, so that the
Mhm.
health of Maywood over the next 50 years will be good.
Certainly. Great words of wisdom by the expert investment advisor, Terrence Hollingsworth. And I know sometime this year we're going to start talking finance again, have online classes sometime in the near future, date to be announced. But in the meantime, we're out there. Terrence is definitely out there doing his thing, traveling, nationwide, and just educating our people, and working with others who are already invested. That's why he said you should invest, because he's speaking from firsthand experience as an investment advisor. So thank you for those words of wisdom, for a subject that's needs to be discussed more often, Terry.
All right, see you guys next week.
All right. So we're going to bring in our guest. Her name is Miss Claudia Vandiver. She is the founder of the Maywood Watchdog, which is an informative and educational platform primarily dedicated to helping the village of Maywood become more empowered. This platform is directed towards focusing on 5 major pillars of the community. Those pillars include education, local government, business, economics, and health and wellness. The ultimate goal is to promote positive changes within the community by promoting both community activism as well as community-based outreach initiatives. And without further ado, I'd like to bring on Ms. Claudia Vandiver.
Hi, Reggie. How are you?
Ms. Claudia, how you doing?
I'm doing all right.
Good, good, good. So thank you for joining our podcast. I would like to talk to you about, what you're doing with Watchdog Maywood. But before we get into that, I would like to just introduce you to the audience, those who may not know who you are. Who is Claudia Vandiver, and what is your connection to the village of Maywood?
Okay. Well, I'm now a resident of Maywood, a long-term resident. I've been here for over 15 years. Ironic, after I was born, my parents were actually living here in Maywood. So this was the first place that I came to live. We moved to Broadview, and then we moved to Bolingbrook, where I pretty much grew up the majority of my childhood, the remainder of it. And then later on in life, my parents always stayed connected to Maywood. And so, after my dad got sick and I had to come back to Maywood and help run his business, I decided to put down roots here about 15 years ago. And I haven't left since. So I'm an official Maywoodian now.
Yes, you are. Well, welcome to the community again, and thank you for the work that you're doing through the Watchdog Maywood. So interesting name, interesting concept. You're talking about, outreach initiatives. Tell me what your motivation was for starting Watchdog Maywood.
Well, ironically, it started as this is the second iteration of it. It started out as the Village Watchdog group, and it was in response to what was happening in our local government. It was initially made up of about, let's say, 4 residents who would go to the board meetings, and we would always be there by ourselves, and we'd be arguing with the administration about what they needed to do, and we would get ignored. And over time, we realized that it didn't matter how many times we brought our concerns to the government, they would just blow us off. So we said, well, why don't we get together and let's form a group where we watch them and we keep track of them. So what we would do is we would gather at members' houses. We would FOIA information about whatever we felt was not correct, and we would figure out ways to put that information together to come back at the administration and put pressure on them. Mm-hmm. In addition to that, during that time, I said, well, hey, it's just us as a small group. Why don't I create a newsletter so that we can actually start getting information out to the people, informing the ones who don't go to the board meetings, but that really need to know about the shady side of what's been going on when we don't come to the board meetings. So that's initially how the Village Watchdog came to be. And so we would primarily be the ones putting pressure on them. So if you hear about people talking about the tax levy, that's because of us. Because before then, they were just raising the tax levy. But when we started pointing out and bringing out information that we FOIA'd, then that's when they got nervous and started saying, well, hey, maybe we can't keep just raising the tax levy like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's how the Village Watchdog came to be.
Nice. And when was the first iteration started? When did it originally start? What year?
I think it was like in 2019. 2019, around that time.
Okay. So you did mention the increase in tax levy, which impacts a lot of all households. And so that was a good initiative. Do you believe, now that you are going into what your 6th year as the Village Watchdog, so those are what's considered short-term initiatives, short-term goals that have garnered results, right? So as you look into the future of your role and the Village Watchdog's role, connecting the issues in Maywood, what other initiatives do you have on your plate or your agenda moving forward?
Well, I have 1,000,001 different initiatives. So this is one key piece of information. So it started out as the Village Watchdog group. There was actually a group of us, but with time, things happen. My mom actually had a stroke right around that time. So as the group started to kind of fade off, everybody went their separate ways. And I decided, after my mom passed in 2023, when I came back to the village and started getting back up to speed and dealing with other issues in the village under the new administration, I realized the same problems were there. So I actually decided to bring it back, but then to rename it the Maywood Watchdog. And then I wanted to broaden the scope just beyond the local politics, because as a community, it's not just our government, especially in Maywood. We have problems where we don't have support for the businesses that we have. We have a high, issue of businesses opening and then closing in a short period of time. So I didn't want to just focus only on the politics. I wanted to focus on everything that contributes to the health and the wealth of a community. So that's going to be your business, that's going to be your education, your health and wellness. So when I rebranded it, which is what I did, as the Maywood Watchdog, then I said I need to start to address all these things. So long story short, under each of those different initiatives, I have tons of stuff coming. So for example, I've already started for business, a small business directory. So when residents say, oh, we don't have any businesses here, well, they just don't know they're here. We have tons of businesses that are opening up, maybe even 10 or 15 just within the last couple of months, but people don't know about it. So I said, well, why don't I start a small business directory so that when they go to the Watchdog website, they can just look and see all these businesses, and then I'm starting a community calendar. You guys may not know, just recently at the local library, we have a chess club now, and people are now learning how to play chess. But
that's
if
awesome.
you can't get that information out to the community, then you don't get the support. So I just wanted to create a centralized location where people can come and learn about the different things. And then the last part of my initiative, to get people empowered, we got to get out into the streets, take what we learn on social media, and then take it into the community and activate and do things with that. So
that's a lot to unpack, and you're doing a lot with, I'm sure, limited resources. So, I commend you for the work that you're doing. And before I forget, I want to ask, do you have a website that the residents can, access for things that you're doing now and plan to do in the future?
Oh, yeah. The Maywood Watchdog. I released it just a couple of months ago. Maywood Watchdog, www.maywoodwatchdog.com. So it's live. And it's currently, I'm constantly, like you said, doing a lot of stuff. So it's under construction. So all of these things are, being built up. Like I said, a small business directory, a community calendar, and then even in anticipation for the elections, I already started formulating things for a candidate guide. So people can know who's running for the school boards and who's running for the park district. So,
Right.
A lot of good stuff is coming.
A lot of good stuff is coming. A lot of challenging things are coming as well. So we know how in Maywood these elections can be very challenging. It could be a little dogmatic.
Yeah, they just had a board meeting last night, so the claws are out. So yeah.
Well, there's a lot to lose, especially for the incumbents. There's a lot who do. So those incumbents who are active and engaged, they don't really need to worry about it. But those who haven't, then you really see that dog coming out and fighting for survival, if you will, not for success. I wanted to ask you, in your statement, the ultimate goal is to promote positive changes within the community by promoting community activism and community-based outreach initiatives. So for those who aren't familiar with the difference between community activism and community-based outreach initiatives, can you kind of separate what you've said so far into what is considered outreach and what is considered activism?
Well, I mean, I think it's a fine line and just a bit of overlap between them. I can only speak about what I'm trying to do, and then people can kind of go from there. But I look at myself as a community activist and then a community organizer. So, for example, one of the major issues, whether I'm talking about small businesses, nonprofits, or residents, or just people in the community, we have an issue where everybody's operating as their own separate silo. So if I'm a business, I feel like I have to do it all by myself. I have to make my business a success. But what if we were able to connect the businesses in Maywood and create a small business community? They would be able to then share resources, learn from one another. They would be able to have power to be able to get government to be able to work more on their behalf. So the point of what I'm trying to say is that as an organizer right now, I'm trying to create relationships with all of the small business owners so that we can form a small business community. And then the activism portion is once I get them organized, then we can activate them to be able to fight for the things that they need for their businesses to succeed. And so the same thing that I'm trying to do for the small business owners, when I meet with different people over nonprofits, a lot of the nonprofits have a lot of the same issues, but they don't know that they're suffering from the same problems or the same lack of resources. But just imagine if they were able to come together and organize, then they would be able to share grant writers and understand the different types of grants that are out there, and maybe even collaborate. Because one of the things I'm really encouraging is the creation of healthy collaborations. Because like I said, it's one thing for everybody to work as a separate finger, but if we can organize into an actual fist, you're going to have a greater impact. So
yeah, I completely understand what you're saying. As a certified and expert grant writer myself, I found exactly what you were saying. A lot of the nonprofits are doing the same thing, but they're struggling for the same dollars. And if you don't have access to those funds or even information about what exists out there as far as foundations and foundational grants or corporate grants or individual grants, or even state government grants, then you're going to continue to fight over pennies. So I couldn't agree with you more from that aspect. And by the way, there are a lot of nonprofit organizations in Maywood.
Yeah, I'm learning. I'm like, I stumble over them. Oh, yeah, you too? Yeah.
Indeed. So I understand a few of my clients are in Maywood and Proviso Township as a whole. So I see the struggle and the struggle is real. Now, I want to ask you this. Maywood, as you probably know, is very territorial, which is why there's so much division. My family's been part of Maywood since the early 70s, 1972 to be exact. So we have over 50 years of experience of working in Maywood from a civic standpoint, from political standpoint, from academic standpoint. And one common denominator is divisiveness in the village of Maywood. And with the school boards, with the village leadership. I mean, this didn't just start this administration. It did not start last administration. This thing has been going on for decades, and it just has not been resolved. Same thing with the business owners. From my perspective, who wrote my dissertation, in part, including the village of Maywood in my dissertation, and talking about it from an economic standpoint, the disinvestment of Maywood was because, in part, the business owners did not work together, whether it was a bank or whether it was an accounting firm, whether it was a laundromat, whether it was a cleaners, whether it was a restaurant, which there's a lot of fast food restaurants back then in the village of Maywood, but they did not work together. That's why there are no grocery stores in Maywood. So they refused to work together, either verbally or non-verbally. How receptive are today's business owners to your suggestion or to your movement for having a small business guide, or, you know, using it as a resource to say, hey, if you want this service, this is available. You know, how receptive have they been with you reaching out to them?
Well, I just spoke to someone just the other day. I was visiting one of the business owners, and somebody who's trying to help the business owner increase his business and grow, you know, asked me the same thing, like, how have I been successful in kind of reaching the different, whether it's small business or nonprofits, how have I been successful? And I think that one of the issues is just trying to overcome people being apprehensive, because a lot of times in our community, we're suspicious, and I know rightfully so. We're suspicious because of previous experiences that we have. And some people, you know, especially since I'm not asking for anything, I'm not charging any money, a lot of them were skeptical that there's a catch behind it. But over time, when they got to see my actions and that my actions match my word, and that I was just giving, and wasn't asking for anything in return, a lot of times they had open arms to me, just because in life we know real from fake. We know, and God has blessed us with a sense of discernment when something's not right. And I think just coming to them genuinely has been very, very much so the reason why I've been successful. And the fact that I'm not a talker, I'm a doer. If I'm going to tell you something, I'm going to do it. So like with the business owners, even before I had uploaded and created a website, I said, I'm going to start a small business directory. Can I take pictures? I'm going to follow up with you on Thursday. I follow up with them on Thursday. So for me, I think just being honest, reliable, and being able to produce evidence that you say you're going to do something and you're going to do it. And then if there's no strings attached, who doesn't want something that benefits them and costs nothing, you know, but your time?
Right. I couldn't agree more. So you attended the most recent village board meeting, is that correct?
I'm a staple. They know me when I come in. You'll see me, and if you watch the board
meeting,
yeah, see, so they know me. I'm a regular.
So in terms of, you know, partnering, have they been open to you working with them in terms of, you know, providing not just suggestions, because you correctly point out you're a doer, in terms of bringing initiatives to the mayor's office or to the trustees, or, you know, just during the board meetings in general, say, hey, this is what I can bring to the table. Let's work together to make this a better Maywood, empower, as you stated. Have they been receptive to you bringing this, you know, this focus to the table?
Well, I don't think a lot of them really know per se the other things that I'm doing. They only know me from the governmental part. So when they see me, they're kind of like, "Oh crap!" It's like, "Oh, what she's coming up with?" Like, "Oh, there she go asking those questions that put us on the spot." So we kind of have a different relationship. I mean, I know they're hearing and they're seeing, and a lot of times people who are on my Facebook page, or people who, you know,
they're going to watch this podcast. They're going to watch this podcast.
Yeah, but they're watching me now. I know, because I'll say things and then they'll say it during the meeting, like, aha, I knew you were watching. So we kind of have a different relationship in the sense that I'm not as on them as I used to be, as far as coming to them with everything I find, but I am still watching what they're doing. So they understand my relationship with the village board is basically watching them to make sure they do what they're supposed to do. And if they're not doing stuff, then I have to let the people know and bring the facts. So that's kind of the relationship I have with them.
Fair enough. So someone who has been part of the community for half a century, I'm going to ask this question because I feel I have a right to do so. Do you feel that this administration has improved since they first stepped in? I know they come in at different times, but I mean in totality, working together, the trustees, the mayor. Do you feel that the voices have been heard and they've taken action from a macro perspective, coming down to a micro perspective, whether it's talking about the tax levy or the fight of the parks between the park district and the village in that regards? So do you feel like there's been, I'm not saying improvements, I'm talking about radical changes, because there's a difference between changes transactional changes and transformational changes. So my question to you is, do you see the transformational changes taking place over the last 4 years?
Well, I think we have to make one distinction, because as somebody who just a couple of months ago went out and spoke to hundreds of Maywood residents, we have to make the distinction of what do we mean by administration, meaning, and we're just talking about the village board, because I know a lot of times when people say administration, they think of one person.
I'm talking about the village board, the trustees, and the mayor.
Exactly. So that's piggybacking, or I wanted to make that distinction. So as a board, a 7-member board, if I answer your question, I would say that I have seen improvements, noticeable improvements, just like along with the other residents, but I have not seen significant change. And it's because of the factions that we have on the board. The fact that whether it's under this administration, or not this administration, under Booker or under Perkins or under Yarbrough, there's still that dynamic where the mindset is this: if my faction gets on the board, we got to get the 4 votes. Because whoever has the 4 votes can run a Boston, like in the game of spades.
Right, exactly.
Everything, I'm getting all the books. You don't even have to guess. So last night's vote, and if you didn't watch it, family out there watching Maywood Family, go and watch the board meeting. It was done before it started, because they already have the votes. And when you have that type of government, when it's so small, the people do not get heard, because the political faction with the most voice, it's just going to do what they want to do. And for that reason,
No, you're right. It goes back to trust, because the community has been burned so many times because of factions. And like you said, getting that 4 votes, the maximum votes, tiebreaker belongs to the mayor. And, it has resulted, even prior to a formal vote being cast, it's been like that for many years. And so that's why I asked that question. Do you see any groundbreaking changes? I accept your answer. It's a good objective response. And so I won't push that any more than necessary. But the elections are coming up in April.
I'm open. You have a question?
Oh, no. This ain't on you, but I do have stronger opinions. I have strong, I have the research to show as far as what needs to be done. And as Dr. Mary Larry just quoted, Maywood has work to do. And, one of my interests, not a concern, but my interest is how are they going to allocate the funds from the casino? Second, 1A is, why is there not a strategic plan in place to lay out the groundwork for what's going to happen when income comes in, or to deal with the fact that they are insolvent, even by millions of dollars? By Trustee Jones, admission, he's been on this podcast for 4 or 5 times at least, and by his own admission that Maywood, and when you're insolvent, you're broke. So what are we going to do about that main aspect called finances and the money coming in once they decide to establish a strategic plan? That for me is the biggest issue of all. Do you agree?
I agree with you. It's just like they say, whether you're a biblical person or a lay person, where there is no vision, there'll be no provision. Meaning, how can we even figure out what's needed if we don't have a plan? But then here's the thing we also have to think about. If the political factions are more so focusing on just getting control, and if the meeting last night doesn't show you anything, this is one of my major issues. I don't feel that as a board, they are financially responsible. A lot of the decisions they make are based on self-interest versus the greater good of the community and the finances. The question that I asked last night, because since August, I've been trying to get a hold of the most recent audit so I can read it to find out exactly, based on last fiscal year, how much debt we're in. And based on the 2022 audit, we have we were in a $5.9 million deficit. So if you want to move the community forward, and for me, a comprehensive plan is not what we had, the one that everybody talks about. That's not a comprehensive plan. That was just a wish list. They had a third-party contractor come in and say, hey, we can put a bakery on this corner. We can go ahead and put some shrubs over there. A comprehensive plan is what they did when we first moved out to Bolingbrook. When we moved to Bolingbrook, it was nothing but cornfields. But the mayor out there had a plan. He specifically said, okay, at this corner, we're going to go ahead and break ground. We're going to have 14 lots. I'm saying we need to have specifics. We need to know where the funding's coming from. We need to have a breakdown of what type of businesses we're going to draw to the community. But like I said, if our current leadership is too busy focusing on who's going to be able to control the board, or, hey, I need to get this type of increase, but you never see them talking about the direction. And I'm gonna be very blunt, like my mom used to say. We are less than 3 months out from the election. And my question is, have we even heard what the plan is from the people who potentially are running for mayor? How do we even know where they stand and where they're gonna take us? And 3 of the people are on the board right now. So if we had 3 potential people for mayor, and even with them on the board, we still don't have a comprehensive plan, that says a lot about the vision for our community. So yeah, that's my issue. I don't think they have a vision for us or a plan in mind.
Yeah, I agree. And, in addition to what you're saying, the comprehensive plan is different than a strategic plan. The comprehensive plan talks about strategies and things like that. But the strategic plan is a process that gets into the layout of providing a foundation, which you're planting a seed so that seed can grow. And with that, you have the business tools, whether it is a Gantt plan or Ansoff matrix or using fishbone analysis. Like, what are your strategies? And like you succinctly stated, the mayor, when I remember when Bolingbrook was a cornfield. Oh my God. Especially on Bowden Avenue and going, westward. But they put in place, I got that beautiful mall, that beautiful outdoor mall. Bolingbrook High School is still as bountiful as ever. It's just as big as Proviso East. The community is growing, it's diverse. But Maywood doesn't have that. And that makes a difference. Even if you had a comprehensive plan, I'd be okay. But to your point, what's happening in Maywood, it's like they have this sticky ball and they throw it against the wall and hope it sticks. It's what's happening. There's no picture that's painted. And I hear people say, like on social media, improvements are being made, they're doing a good job. But Madam Claudia, my rebuttal is you're paid to do a good job. You're not voted to do a bad job. Like, you want a cookie because you're doing a good job? You're supposed to have pieces in place that's going to transform the village of Maywood, because that's what you promised, trustee, mayor. And have these shops open up, it's okay. But how does that impact employment? How does that impact them economically? If you're bringing in a Kroger's distribution center, what percentage of those employees are from Maywood? Why aren't there a Kroger grocery store in the village of Maywood, since we're talking about grocery stores?
Yeah.
We're a resident of 24,000.
Yeah, and then I just want to make this one point. My mother, she always used to brag about the mayor of Bolingbrook. She would actually go talk to him. She'd see him in the summer. And she said, you know what? We got to give him all the credit, because he was a man who got in there and he had a vision for Maywood. So I used to, just to show you how bad it was back then, we used to play in the cornfield. So here I am growing up in Broadview, where us as kids are riding on our big wheels, to now going out to the middle of places with cornfields. But he had a vision of taking it from being just a 2-lane city to having a wave pool, no other wave pool in Illinois. And he constantly built on that over the years and drew out bigger and bigger visions for it. We used to play in the fields where the mall is right now.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, I'm dating myself. We used to have our dirt bikes, and it was just forest and trees over there. And now to see it blossoming the way it's blossomed is next level. But it has
Yeah.
to start with the vision. But that's what I'm saying. And that's what I feel a lot of times, even in going into the election season as the Maywood Watchdog, I'm pushing the narrative that we need to vet who we plan to elect. We have to look for people who just don't have the talk, but they have the vision to say, hey, just like this is a multi-million-dollar corporation, because it is. Maywood is multi-million-dollar budget. We need to run it like a business. So how can you run a multi-million-dollar business but not have a plan for the resources? You have to have people of that mindset, that visionary mindset.
Yeah, like you said, the financial skills appear to be lacking. And I know they all bring their different areas of expertise, but together, it's obviously there's a lack of continuity, which means there's a lack of vision. Like you stated, where there's no vision, people will perish. People perish because there's a lack of vision. Where is the strategic plan? Where's the comprehensive plan? Where is a plan? Where is a plan? You need a plan. So with the election coming up 3 months away, there's a lot of work to do. And I hope and pray that the residents will vet out the candidates and not vote for someone of trustee or a mayor just because they're your buddy and they grew up. And that's the other thing in Maywood. They've known each other for years. Like we've known each other for years. Trustee Brandon, I've known him since he was like 10 years old when he was taking my public speaking class at Canaan Church in Maywood. I've known, Trustee Peppers because we played against each other in Little League Baseball, Senior League Baseball. The Mayor Booker, his family, I think his brothers went to Proviso East. I don't know him personally, but, his family is connected to Maywood. And the list goes on. And we got to get out of that mindset of, okay, I know you, I know your family, we're cool. Even Dr. Mary Larry, I've known her for years. But that doesn't mean that you should vote for her just because you know him or her. What are their credentials? What do they bring to the table? What is their plan? Like you said, what is their vision for the village? And how would that benefit the residents and not just their buddies or outsiders? Do you agree?
Right. Yeah. And then I'm going to say something. It's going to get people mad. Chicago Bears. Okay. And look, I don't even follow the sports, but let me just say that I don't watch the sports. But I know that's kind of like a curse word right now to say Chicago Bears. If I say people go and then they do that, and we got to get now. Just imagine if we kept the same players for the next 10 years, the same caliber players, the same coach and whatever. Would we have a right to complain about the fact that they keep losing? No. We would sit up there and say, no, okay, first of all, that coach has to go. You have to clear house in the sense that you have to identify which players are going to be able to go, that's going to make the cut, that's going to meet that need. I know I'm preaching to the choir. Okay, turn the
no, you got it. Nope. Keep going.
Exactly. But the whole point is we would have to substitute out the ones that aren't performing and get the talent that we need. So why don't we run our government like that? Like you said, we vote for people based on familiarity, likability, or just, hey, they seem like they kind of cool. And we're voting for them to run our community, this multi-million-dollar corporation. And then when they get up there and we watch them, we're like, well, why can't they run this corporation? Okay.
What are they doing?
We need to look at it as we need to create a fantasy football league of elected officials to run our community.
Politicians.
Yeah. Well, we need a fantasy league. We need to get the best of the best. And that starts with us vetting them, talking to them before we go to the polls, figuring out what they're about.
So I just got to point this out, Sister Claudia. So I'm here in the DC area, the DMV. Okay. So week 5, I think it was week 4, week 5, when the Bears came to Washington, DC, played against the Redskins. They're the Commanders, but they always will be the Redskins to me. And when they won that game, when a Hail Mary pass, because I'm educated in the DMV, my students, man, they got into me so deep. What happened to the Bears? What happened to your Bears? Oh my God, I can't believe your Bears lost. And do you know that ripped the heart out of the fans? Of course, my heart as well. But the Bears did not win for the next 7 weeks until this past game on Sunday when they beat the Green Bay Packers in Green Bay. But to your point, I blame the owners. I blame the GM because he's the one who selected the coach. He was part of the process that hired the coach of the Bears and picked the players from the draft, right? And now they finished the season 5-12, 5 wins, 12 losses. And they fired the coach mid-season. But the GM, even though he came from a winning franchise or a franchise that was credible, he did not win for the Bears. Did not win in this 3 season for the Bears. So he needs to go. He needs to go.
But you would never say, "Oh, well, no. See, he seemed nice though. Let's just keep him on for like 4 or 5 more years."
But people are saying that. People are saying that, Sister Claudia. People are saying that he's just been there 3 years. We need to give him more time. Well, how much more time do you need? He's gone through 3 drafts. You know, he made trades. He did not improve this area of business, the business of sports. He didn't improve this area called the offensive line. He did not improve this area called the defensive line. Okay. He traded away their best defensive player several years ago, you know, Roquan Smith, and now he's about to win a Super Bowl for the Baltimore Ravens here in the DMV. I mean, they like the dude, but he's not performing. And like you said, just like in business, the business of government, if you are the head and you are not performing, doesn't matter how much I like you, we have to move on from you, period, because it's not helping. And that's been the problem with Maywood. That has been the problem with Maywood. Voting for mayors, voting for trustees who are not qualified, let alone should win, okay? And you making unilateral decisions without having a referendum, without community input, and then you fail, you blame somebody else. That sounds like the Bears to me. Blame somebody else. That's a losing franchise. It's a losing proposition. So you should be able to have a FOIA to get the last order from the Village of Maywood.
Oh yeah, no, they're getting it to me. They're at the end of the meeting. The person over the finance says she sent me the wrong one, but she's sending it to me, so it's available now. But I'm sorry, I got your blood pressure up. I told you I was the Chicago Bears.
Man, yeah, you did. The blood. I was just recently, in the locker room. I was like, let me go work out. I wore my Bear stuff, and I'm walking through LA Fitness, and some people like. Like that. Like, I can't believe you got the nerve to wear the Bears uniform. Anything Bears, anything Chicago Bears. So I'm getting locker room, and it's like, you from Chicago, dog? I was like, I'm from the area. It's like, dang, man, what happened to your Bears, man? I want to pimp slap them, but you know what? You're right.
You be like, don't talk about my Bears. Both
right. Right, exactly. Look, I could talk about them. You can't talk about them. Exactly. I could talk about Maywood. You can't talk about them if you're not connected to Maywood. You know what I'm saying?
Go, Red.
It's the same difference.
You're real Chicago, and I'm proud of you. Representing.
No question. You can't talk about my Bears. Learn to win some championships or something. I don't know. But you're right, though. I mean, you should not vote for someone just because you're cool with them and just because you've known them your entire life. And we can't do that. Village of Maywood, the board cannot do that. Anyone who's running for a seat, and even for a school board member, right? Because you work with the school, right? Mm-hmm. Do you agree? You can't even do that for a school board member. You run for school board. If you're not qualified, I love you to life, but I can't vote for you because my grandchild, somebody I knew, I'm from District 89 or 209. I can't vote for you.
Mm-hmm. Because that's why I want to create the candidate guide, and I'm still figuring out how it's going to look, but I want people to be able to know who's running. Like, even though, and like I said, I know it's not about me, but I'm being transparent. I told you that I'm even running for a trustee, but I'm using my platform to put everybody out there because I want our community to know all the options so that they themselves, without being steered in one direction or another, can get to vet everybody. Like you said, from the school board to the library board, you need to know who you're voting for because ultimately they have the ability to affect us all. So let's just find the best people for the job. Let's get the fantasy league, and then we'll worry about the Bears another day. We'll
see what happens. I'm just gonna continue to pray for progress. I'm gonna pray for progress. So we'll see. But since you made mention of the fact that you're running for trustee, first we like for you to come back when we get into the thick of the campaign season. which really is kicking off, now. But also, what kind of response have you received when you announce your candidacy and you're in a position as Watchdog Maywood? Do you feel like there's been some, like have the community been receptive to your role in both arenas as candidate and part of this initiative?
Well, I just recently, like within the last couple of weeks, announced it because, like I said, I'm not a politician by the way I think of politicians. I'm an activist. And so I've been focusing on the activism. I haven't really had time. But since I've been telling people the last couple of weeks, they've been very receptive because they know my work. And they've watched me as not a politician, but just as a community activist who's spoken about the issues for over a decade now. So, I'm getting nothing but positive feedback. But like I said, I know the campaign season is coming, and I did get challenged. I know my petition did get challenged.
Okay.
But I won both times. But
yeah. It's happened. It's happened.
It's the nature.
It's certainly, especially politics, business of politics can be brutal sometimes. I wanted to ask you, what was I going to ask you? Oh, so Terry and I have had this conversation about running as a slate, because people tend to vote for everybody in the slate, whether they qualified or not, which I think is a mistake. I mean, unless you are qualified, then you should not run you should not vote for somebody just because they're part of a slate. Are you part of a slate, or are you running as your own independent candidate?
Yeah, I guess I'm by nature a lone wolf in the sense that I want to be able to represent, honestly, anything I stand for or I say. I want to be able to stand on my square and back it 100%. And I felt, and this is no disrespect to anybody on a slate, I don't want to be on a slate because, like you said, I've seen firsthand where there'll be a slate and people will just run off of the smoke of the front person. And I want to be held accountable for what I do. So if I tell people I'm going to do something, I don't have to check with this person and I don't have to go along to get along. And to me, that was one of the issues. I've seen what happens when we get, once again, a slate on the board. They vote as a group, even when it's to our detriment. Like I said, and I don't want to dog one slate or another, but the prime example is the compensation vote. When I was out getting petitions, you don't know how many people I had to talk down off of a ledge. They were so pissed off. I can't believe it. Why are you giving yourself that increase and whatever? And there were so many people at that first board meeting about the compensation that were angry. They couldn't even get through public comments to talk about the issues that were on the agenda. So my point is, that's a prime example where the desires of a few superseded the wishes of the masses. And it's because people want to go along to get along. And that's not our government. Our government is supposed to be 7 individual board members who vote based on what they feel is right, but it's supposed to be a representation of a people, not of a group, not of a clique. And that's the problem. We have too many cliques and groups. And it's
I agree. I'm glad you said it so succinctly. The comprehensive, the vote where they paid. I think Trustee Jones said 400% pay increase for the next term. To me, that is that's asinine, to say the least. And the village still doesn't have a village manager? Do they have an interim village manager still? Or
no, they have a village manager. He's been there since like March. It's Frank Torres. He's the village manager. So
that's right. That's right.
Yeah. And then just a quick thing. I also wanted to tell the people, I actually FOIA'd all of the information of salaries for nearby communities.
Yes.
Similar government. So people can go on the website. I'm going to put it up tomorrow, or on the Facebook, and you can actually see, like, for example, River Forest, they don't pay their board anything. They don't pay the mayor. They don't pay their trustees. So compare them and their government not paying anything to what we're paying. That's not, that wasn't in the interest of the people. It was.
Well, it not only that, but it's not equitable.
Mm-hmm.
And Trustee Jones said the same thing, that you're saying. It's not fair. If you look at Maywood compared to the other villages, Westchester, Broadview, Bellwood, Merrill's Park, so forth, we aren't on that level. And the fact that, Riverside, they're not River Forest, they're not getting paid, yet they have a plethora of resources. It says something about leadership in Maywood overall. And again, it's not just necessarily this administration, but it's been a practice. It is the culture, if you will, in the village of Maywood. And I'm not advocating for them to not get paid. I mean, I understand time is money. You get paid. That's their decision. But nonetheless, if you're in debt by millions of dollars and you don't have an established budget and you don't have a strategic plan, there is no increase. Like you said, if you're on a job and you are at standards or below and you're in the service industry, you don't get a raise. Matter of fact, you go on a PIP, right? You go on a performance improvement plan. Maywood is on a performance improvement plan, and we cannot continue to accept mediocrity. And so, final, as we close this podcast, want to get your final thoughts on that side of the ledger as it relates to that.
Oh, sorry. There was a lapse. I didn't hear the last thing. It was going in and out. Can you say just the last part again? The audio was going in and out.
So I just want to get, I just want to get your thoughts on what I said as far as, the village of Maywood being, to me, they're on a PIP, a performance improvement plan, because the performance level is not equitable, and it's not on the same level as the neighboring communities. And Trustee Jones even said as much. So reflecting on what I just said, what are your thoughts about that, inclusive of what Trustee Jones said as far as Maywood not being, not working on the same level as the other communities who are not getting any money for their service?
Right. And I look at it like this. It's like the dynamic is flipped. When I looked at Evanston, River Forest, and Oak Park, their budget is the most lucrative budgets out of all of the municipalities. They take in the most revenue, and they are some of the least paid, or, in comparison to Maywood. Like River Forest, it's supposed to be the other way. If we currently have more debt, and based on the 2022 audit, if Maywood, 60% of the revenue that they rely on to pay their bills are from property taxes. And I'm sorry, I'm going to be the bearer of bad news to my fellow Maywood family. Just looking at the tax levy increases, our taxes are going up again in 2025. How do you justify then increasing salaries, which increases the board's budget, which means they have to come up with more money to be able to pay that? And where do you think that money is going to come from? It's going to come from property taxes, right? So why, as a village board, would you then deliberately increase another financial burden on the people instead of cutting expenses? And that's the one thing I want to leave us with. We can talk about the levy because we brought the levy to the board, but I have yet to hear in this 4 years significant strategies in place to cut all the wasteful spending. You can see they're not a board of cutting. They're adding additional expenditures onto the backs of taxpayers. And so long as we have that, we're going to continue to have to be overtaxed, because what other revenue are they relying on to pay their bills? It has to be our tax.
Great point. Right. And I hope that part of the answer is the revenue that they generate from the casino to offset some of these major expenses that they have, but they allocate it responsibly. Sister Claudia. So I want to ask you this question, because we do want you to come back, when you start getting into the canvassing and promoting yourself as a trustee. If you were elected trustee, would you be able to work with the other trustees who are in place now if they win re-election, including the mayor who's part of the board? Would you feel confident in being able to get things done if you were elected?
Well, I think the way that people describe me is I'm fair and I'm just, because as the Maywood Watchdog, I could right now be blasting people. And I'm not being arrogant. I'm saying people have sent me things about different candidates. And even when I see other people who are out there as candidates for other office, we're able to work together now. I don't feel like I'm competing with anybody. I look at it like this, just like as a physician or in my practice or going to medical school, my only competition is me. I look at the village board as a boardroom. And when I'm there to conduct the business of the people. And I'm a person who I can separate emotions from what my job is. Just like all of us go to work and at some point in time have had to work with people who we can't stand. But if you want that paycheck and you don't want to get fired, you're able to put that to the side. Well, as a trustee, I would enter the board room as this is a place of business. Don't bring that foolishness in here. And we need to handle the business of the people. And that's what needs to happen. If we don't like each other, that hand stays outside. But here, it's about the business of the people.
Ms. Claudia Vandiver, it's been a joy and a privilege to have you on the podcast again. Would love for you to come back. I want to give you a minute or two to express final thoughts to the audience. And afterwards, please stay on the podcast so we can talk afterwards. But the stage is yours for the next couple minutes for final thoughts.
Okay, well, I'll be brief and succinct. And all I want to say, we can have what we deserve as a community. I see so many good people across the different candidates and across the different slates. And I believe that if we just take time to vet the right people, we're going to see a greater level of progress. It's going to happen rapidly. Because right now, the thing that's holding us back is this inner conflict for someone to be at the head or be on top. But if we stop allowing the powers to put the politics and the positions in front of the people and the purpose, if we can switch that narrative and get people in there with a servitude mentality who's about the people and the purpose, then we'll get the change that we want. But so long as it continues to be about infighting and one-upsmanship, then we're going to keep having, and I'm going to be silly here, the real house politicians in Maywood with starring this faction versus that faction. We're going to be on the front line of that. And as a community, we as the taxpayers are the ones who suffer when the leadership is in a state of disarray like this. So vet who you plan to elect is what I'd say.
Fantastic. Words well spoken, knowledge shared, and great conversation ensued. I want to thank Ms. Claudia Vandiver, who is the head of the Village Watchdog Group of Maywood, for providing her insight and for sharing her thoughts here on the podcast. And I ask you to tune in on our next podcast, where we will invite our next guest. We're getting into the political season. And so the heat is going to be turned up. And so will the questions. And with that said, please like us on Facebook, subscribe on YouTube, and tune in for our next podcast. I am your host, Dr. Reggie Ratliff. I pray that you'll be safe. God bless you, and have a great night. Peace.